I am here to start this holiday merry vlog in earnest. I have been home for like 5 to 6 days now. I'm home for at least another week, but today is the very first day that I actually ventured basically outside of my home. I have just been basking in the holiday spirit, being home with my parents and my siblings, but I had a couple of holiday gift cards to burn through. So as you saw, I went to a few bookstores and went a little bit crazy, but I'm hoping these books will sustain me, you know, at least for the first few months of the new year. And I've been home, like I said, for almost a week, and I've finished 3 books, which for me is a lot in that time frame because I went to, well, you know, it's a time of year where I'm not doing anything except puzzles, watching movies, and reading. But even before I came home, I went to one of the famous McNally Jackson bookstores and got a couple of tinies. If you know me, I tend to gravitate towards like really chunky books, and that's what I have spent like the majority of 2022 reading. But I was in the mood for some slim books to round out the year. So let's start with those. I will not go through every single blurb of every single book, otherwise we will be here for a very long time. We'll just talk about like the highlights and the need to knows. So let's start with one of the books that out of this whole selection I'm most excited about, because if you recall, I ended last year's reading with a Claire Keegan, Small Things Like These, and absolutely loved it. If I had read it earlier in the year last year, it may very well have made it to my top 10, but it made it to my honorable mentions. But this one I am super excited about. Keegan writes about like very specific settings in Ireland with very specific moods. And this is another super slim novella named Foster. And I will read the blurb. So, it is a hot summer in rural Ireland. A child is taken by her father to live with relatives on a farm, not knowing when or if she will be brought home again. In the Kinsella's house, she finds an affection and warmth she has not known, and slowly in their care begins to blossom. But there is something unspoken in this new household, where everything is so well tended to, and this summer must soon come to an end. Very excited about this. And then, one of the 2 books that I've already read this week, that was a little bit lackluster for me, but I'm still glad I read it, is McGlue by Ottessa Moshfegh. So I picked this up just to round out my reading of Moshfegh's work. This is, again, a super slim novella about a man who is imprisoned because he's believed to have killed his travel companion and very good friend. And it's like a study on memory, recollection, and it's really dark and gritty. Like I said, I was not super impressed. I think just comparing it to Moshfegh's other work, I was a little bit let down, but I do think that the last like 100 or so pages are definitely stronger than like the first 50. So I ended up enjoying it, but just compared to like Lapvana, which is one of my favorite things I've read this year, wasn't super impressive. One book that I have seen everywhere but never actually knew what it was about. I think the cover is just really iconic and shows up a lot on BookTube and Bookstagram. But when I actually picked it up and read the blurb, I am very intrigued, and that is The Water Cure by Sophie McIntosh. So I will read the blurb of this one as well, because if you're like me, you might not know what it is about. King has tenderly staked out a territory for his wife and 3 daughters, Grace, Leah, and Skye. Here on his island, women are protected from the chaos and violence of men on the mainland. The cult-like rituals and therapies they endure fortify them for the spreading toxicity of a degrading world. But when King disappears and 2 men and a boy wash ashore, the sister's safe world begins to unravel. Over the span of one blisteringly hot week, a psychological cat and mouse game plays out. Sexual tensions and sibling rivalries flare as the sisters are forced to confront the amorphous threat the strangers represent. A haunting and riveting debut, The Water cures a fiercely poetic feminist revenge fantasy that has a startling reflection of our time. I'm very excited about this. This may be one that I try to squeeze in before January. And then the second book of this whole selection, the only other book that I've already read, and I'm not going to talk about it too much because you will see it and hear about it again in my top books of 2022 because that's how much I enjoyed it, is Venomous Lumpsunker by Ned Bauman. It is about the booming extinction industry that explodes in the very near future, and I absolutely loved it. So highly, highly, highly recommend this one, but I will talk about it in more detail very soon. So this one I hadn't heard of before, but the cover and the title really intrigued me, and that is Why Fish Don't Exist. I just love that. Then another one that was new to me, but I could not resist this cover. I think it's beautiful. The Council of Animals. Come on, do we love or no? This is an interesting one. It's very sparse. There are some fun illustrations, and I think would be like a good book to read in an afternoon, cuddled up by the fire. So the blurb of this one goes, "Now," continued the cat, "there is nothing more difficult than changing an animal's mind. But I will say, in case I can change yours, humans are more useful to us outside our bellies than in. Perhaps, after the calamity, the animals thought the humans had managed to do themselves in. But it turns out a few were cowering in makeshift villages. So the animals, among them a cat, a dog, a crow, a baboon, a horse, and a bear, have convened to debate whether to help the last human stragglers or to eat them. Rest assured, there is a happy ending. Sort of." Right up my alley. This sounds like so much fun and a super cozy read. Then, kind of a classic that I've seen people talk about but never felt too intrigued by, but I think that's because I didn't truly understand what it was about. But I picked up Orlando by Virginia Woolf, which is a very beautiful cover. I don't know that it really speaks to the content of the book, but I enjoy it. All right. As his tale begins, Orlando is a passionate 16-year-old nobleman whose days are spent in rowdy revelry filled with the colorful delights of Queen Elizabeth I's court. By the close, 3 centuries have passed, and he will have transformed into a 36-year-old woman in the year 1928. Orlando's journey is also an internal one. He is an impulsive poet who learns patience in the matters of the heart, and a woman who knows what it is to be a man. Virginia Woolf's most unusual creation, Orlando, is a fantastical biography as well as a funny, exuberant romp through history that examines the true nature of sexuality. I mean, this sounds incredible. And the writing takes up not a lot of the page, so I think this looks longer than it actually is, but I'm very excited about that. So that rounds out what I've picked up in the past 2 weeks from McNally Jackson bookstore. And then today I went, as you saw, to a few bookstores, and that will make up the rest of the books that I go through. So I like to have the physical copies of books that I've read generally, but specifically of ones I enjoyed. As you may know, I listened to Sorrow and Bliss earlier in the year, and I just wanted a copy of it. Would highly recommend. I really enjoyed this one, and I really enjoyed the audiobook, but I just wanted to own it. And then I picked up The Hike by Drew Magari. Fun cover. I apologize about the hat. I've been wearing it all day, so I've committed to it. I tried to take it off, and my hair is very flat on top, so we are committed. So one day Ben decides to go on a hike. He didn't plan on being out long. He had a business meeting later that night and a family to return home to. He didn't expect to get lost in a deep and twisting path that would lead him into a world of man-eating giants, demons, and colossal insects, and he didn't expect to find himself on a quest, aided by a profane crustacean and a variety of magical objects that would test the depths of his very soul. I mean, what a blurb. Very odd and twisty and labyrinthine, so I am very excited. And then a book that it was on my radar like earlier in the year because this was longlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction, but I didn't end up ever picking it up, but I'm very interested in it. It is Build Your House Around My Body by Violet Coopersmith. Pretty cover. So this is about like two twisting connected storylines. One in the 1980s, a teenage daughter of a wealthy Vietnamese family loses her way in an abandoned plantation and is forever changed. Split to 2011, a young, unhappy Vietnamese American woman disappears from her home without a trace. The fates of both women are inexplicably linked, bound together by past generations, by ghosts and ancestors, and by the legacy of possessed bodies and possessed lands. Then, a book that is very odd, but has been on my radar, I think since Books and Lala talked about it, what feels like a long time ago, but I had just never seen a copy in any bookstore I walked into, and I saw this, and it's a very big copy, but I am interested in bits and pieces of the horror genre. I don't think I enjoy like traditional horror novels, but I enjoy the horror that plays with like the weird and the uncanny and the odd. So I thought that I would really enjoy The Last House on Needless Street by Katrina Ward, because I've just heard it's about a talking cat and a very strange man, and that's really all I know. But the back says, in a boarded up house on a dead-end street at the edge of the wild Washington woods lives a family of three. A young girl who isn't allowed outside, not after last time. A man who drinks alone in front of his TV, trying to ignore the gaps in his memory. And a house cat who loves napping and reading the Bible. An unspeakable secret binds them together. But when a new neighbor moves in next door, what is buried out among the birch trees may come back to haunt them all. Excited about this. Then, as you know, I recently read Perdita Street Station by China Mievel and absolutely loved it. Most likely my favorite book of the year. So I just needed more Mievel, and of the 3 stores we went to today, only one had a copy of a Mievel, and it was one that I haven't heard too much about, and the cover is admittedly ugly, but I just want anything Mievel. So this is called The City and the City. Yeah, like I said, not a great cover. The blurb, you know, says it's about like a murder, a detective, crossing borders, interconnectedness, and crime, and like the dark underbelly of different societies. So I just can't wait to read anything else by Mievel. I was blown away by Perdita Street Station. We have to... Alright, now, that was one bookstore. Now, the other bookstore I went to today is one of my favorite. I've only been there twice. They just have a great selection, and it's a very cozy bookstore. One of the books I got is another by Hain Khan. This is the author who wrote The Vegetarian, which was one of my favorite books from last year. Haunting, enticing, beautiful, devastating. And so, you know, Human Acts, I'm not even sure what it's about, but I just want to read more by this author. So we will see. Then I got, so this is like a couple of books by authors that I've read 1 or 2 books by and now want to read more by them. So I got another Colson Whitehead, Zone 1, which I'm not familiar with, but it's about a pandemic that has devastated the planet, sorting humanity into 2 types, the uninfected and the infected, the living and the living dead. I have not heard of this book, but the cover is pretty beautiful. It is called The Essex Serpent by Sarah Perry. I love a book like this. So London, 1893, seeking refuge after the death of her husband, Cora Seaborn departs for coastal Essex. Once there, she hears rumors that after nearly 300 years, the mythical Essex serpent, a fearsome creature that once roamed the marshes, has returned. Eager to investigate, Cora is introduced to Paris vicar William Ransom, and it seems like they go on this adventure together. So this sounds like a fun one. Then I got a Sarah Waters, my first ever Sarah Waters, and I think she is much beloved. This is Fingersmith. which I think is like a autumnal winter read. Another London, 1862 rather. Sue Trinder, orphaned at birth, grows up among petty thieves, fingersmith, under the rough but loving care of Mrs. Suxby and her family. One day, gentleman, an elegant con man, arrives with a proposition for Sue. If she works as a maid to Maud Lily, a gentlewoman, and aids gentleman in her seduction, they will all share in Maud's vast inheritance. With dreams of repaying her adopted family, Sue agrees to the plan. Then I got a book that I just needed. I felt super drawn to it. I'm so excited about this one. It's a nonfiction, Fairies, A Dangerous History. So just listen to this blurb and you will understand why I just needed to have this book. How dangerous were fairies? In the late 17th century, they could still scare people to death. Little wonder, as they were thought to be descended from fallen angels and to have the power to destroy the world itself. Such beliefs, along with some remarkably detailed sightings, lingered on in places well into the 20th century. From the wild magic of A Midsummer's Night Dream, through the dark glamour of Keats, to the improbably erotic poem Goblin Maker, or the paintings inspired by opium dreams, the amoral otherness of fairies ran side by side with the newly delicate or feminized creatures of the Victorian world. In the past 30 years, the enduring link between fairies and nature has been robustly exploited by eco-warriors and conservationists, from Ireland to Iceland. This book tells the story of many fairy terrors which lay between Titania and Tinkerbell. This sounds so good. And then, I am a little bit intimidated by this book, but I've just heard such wonderful things about it, specifically about the first book. When I picked this up, the man who worked at the bookstore was saying that the first of the trilogy is by far the best and the most beloved and the most worth it to read and invest your time to. This is Three-Body Problem. Like I said, I'm a little bit intimidated because I think this is very science-y and very science-heavy, and I'm hoping that it's not too complex for me, but I just feel like it's time. I'm really getting into sci-fi. It's one of my favorite genres to read, as well as like fantasy and the weird and eco-fiction. So I feel like it is time to give this one a try. And then, you may know that Barnes & Noble is doing their annual sale, 50% off hardbacks. So we ended our day there, and I went actually for another book, and I had been waiting online at the information desk for somebody to help me find it because I couldn't locate it, and I was holding this other book, and I had waited for like 15 minutes on this line, and then I got up there and I was like, they didn't have the book that I was looking for, so I was just like, well, I'm just gonna buy the book that's already in my hands because I don't want to look stupid. So I bought Primitives by Eric Krauss. I haven't heard of this, but I was intrigued enough to pick it up and carry it around for 10 minutes. So I hope I enjoy it. I mean, it was 50% off, so can't be too bad. But 30 years after the Great Fatigue infected the globe, the cure regressed most of the human race to a primitive state. Seth Keller makes a gruesome discovery in his adopted father's makeshift lab. This revelation forces him to leave the safety of his desert home and the only person he has ever known. 3,000 miles away in the jungles of Costa Rica, Sarah Peoples has made her own discovery, just as horrific and just as life-changing. It will take her far from the fledgling colony of New Haven, yet never out of reach from this ruthless authoritarian leader. On separate journeys a world apart, Seth and Sarah find their fates crashing together in an epic struggle between good and evil, where the differences aren't always clear. Among the grim realities of civilization's demise, they discover that some of the remaining survivors may pose an even greater threat than the abominations they were taught to fear. Fighting for their lives, they're confronted with a haunting question: is humanity worth saving? Dun dun dun. So I hope I like it, and I'm just gonna go grab a couple more books that my mom lovingly gifted me for Christmas, so I will be right back. But the first book is We Run the Tides, which I have seen all over the place. I think probably the cover has deterred me thus far from picking it up, but my mom has said she's heard wonderful things. It's about two teenage girls who witness a horrible act, or do they? They vehemently disagree on what has happened, and that their rupture is followed by one of the girls' sudden disappearance. So it shakes the quiet community in which they live and threatens to expose unspoken truths. So, we will see. The next book is described as a badass debut by any measure, nimble, knowing, and electrifying, by Colson Whitehead, whom we trust. This is Monticello by Jocelyn Nicole Johnson. This sounds really, really wonderful. It is, I believe, isn't it short stories, or is that not correct? I thought it was like interconnected short stories. So I will read you a portion of the blurb. So Johnson's characters traverse Virginia's landscape, still stained by some of America's most heinous acts, in pursuit of a place called home. In the novella Monticello, a diverse group of Charlottesville neighbors flee violent white supremacists and seek refuge in Jefferson Historic Plantation Home as they attempt to outlive a long-foretold racial and environmental unraveling. Sounds amazing. Colson Whitehead is blurbed, and that's all I really need to know. So I'm super excited about this one. And then you may know that I am really into reading about Irish folklore and mythology recently, like bits and pieces of different books, and just taking my time to get through some of these books that I picked up in Ireland a couple of months ago. But my mom got me a beautiful book, A Treasury of Irish Fairy and Folk Tales. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful. And like just beautifully laid out. I am so excited about this one. It talks about all different stories. It goes into like the table of contents, talks about fairies, ghosts, priests and saints, witches and fairy doctors, kings, queens, princesses, giants, rocks and stones, the devil, legends of Western Ireland. So it covers anything and everything. And I'm so excited to slowly make my way through this one, kind of a story at a time. But I love this. And then my mom, it's still in its wrapping, so I don't have scissors with me right now, but my mom saw this book on one of the like best books of the year, one of those articles, and this was one of the best books of the year in art history. So it is like a big coffee table book. Look, I mean, they just showed like a snippet of some of the beautiful spreads. So I'm super excited to go through this. And also display it because it is beautiful. That is my very large book haul. Let me know which of these books that I've mentioned today I should start with. Because I think I am overwhelmed by the options. But I am going to go down and read more of my current book, which is none of these. It's a book that I've had since the dawn of time, The Hobbit. I am making my way through that, really enjoying myself. My sister got me such a cute present. This is our my mini tree. But let me show you one of the most beautiful ornaments that my sister got me this year. How cute is that? Little dog in the window. I love. Hello everyone. The days are absolutely flying by. It is already New Year's Eve, so Happy New Year's. I left my house again for like one of the very few times. I have been absolutely basking in puppy heaven. My dog is home obviously, and then my sister's dog is staying with us for like the past week and a half, and it is bliss. But I am out of the house today because I did my like annual clear out of my childhood bedroom, where I realized all of the clothes and just stuff that I haven't touched in many years. So I am at Goodwill trying to do a drop off. I went to one of the like just big boxes where you can donate clothes, but it was actually full to the brim and I couldn't even open the pulley chute thing. In terms of reading, I finished The Hobbit, which I really enjoyed. I don't know what has happened to me this year, but I got so into like The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, the whole thing. I watched both trilogies many times. Rings of Power came out, which I ate that show up. I loved it so much. I can't wait for it to come back, and I think it's not coming back for a while. That's the rumor. But I, for some reason, thought that the book the books would be super dry, but actually they're super readable, or at least The Hobbit was super readable, really enjoyable, very like cute, and I don't want to minimize the writing because I do think it is like a robust fantasy novel, but it's really approachable, and like the narrator's voice is really whimsical and fun and really draws you in. There's a lot of like, and then we moved on to, and I wonder what Bilbo was thinking. It's a lot of that kind of writing. And having watched the movies really recently, it was all like right there in my mind's eye that I could visualize everything. So the copies, I think I've showed them on here before, but the copies that I have of The Hobbit and then all of the 3 Lord of the Rings books are actually from my dad that he had when he was a pipsqueak. So I can show you those copies again. They're like, some are in better conditions than others, but I absolutely loved reading them. They're like very yellowed pages, which is just delicious. And then I put a poll up on Instagram yesterday of what my first read of the new year should be, either The Water Cure, Zone 1, or The Hike. And The Water Cure won by a lot. So I have been reading that for the past day and a half, and it's a surprisingly fast read. I'm almost like halfway through, and I don't know why I thought it would take me a lot longer. I just thought it was denser, and I am loving it. The writing is super hypnotizing. The atmosphere, it has like the same hot, sweaty tension that Hot Milk by Deborah Levy has. But I am absolutely loving it. There's so many different narrative voices going on, and it pops in and out of different characters at like just the right time to give you another perspective, and it's really like depraved, and there's always the hint of violence. It's reminded me a little bit of the Deloria, just in the sense of like the matriarch figure and what she represents. But there's a lot going on, a lot bubbling under the surface that I don't know if it's going to like absolutely explode, or if it will be similar to Pew by Catherine Lacey, where even the final climactic moment still feels like, I don't know. I'm excited to see where it goes, but men have just arrived on the island. But even before that, it was terrifying. There's a lot of darkness surrounding these sisters, this mother, and this like sanctuary, this Eden that they've created. So I am really enjoying it.